war because I think you would agree we cannot let lunatics have a nuclear weapon. Do you agree?
I was just talking with Lucas about these troops being pulled out of Europe, about 5,000 of them from Germany. I want to get your take, too, because it does seem like it is a direct message to our allies. You know, if you're not helping, then we're not going to keep our soldiers there.
Trump's own generals just blocked him from accessing the nuclear codes. His own military looked at the sitting president of the United States and said, "No, not you, not today." And while that was happening, Trump hadn't been seen in public for 3 days straight. The 25th Amendment was written for exactly this moment, and Lawrence O'Donnell just said it out loud. It was ratified in 1967, authorizing the vice president and a majority of the cabinet to remove the president from power when and if snorts. That president is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office.
Yeah, it's certainly a message. I don't know that it's a big deal. I mean, everything's a big deal right now because we just don't know which way things will go. But 5,000 troops, maybe it's a brigade that rotates through like out of Fort Lewis, Washington, and maybe it's just, hey, when you guys come home, we're not sending another one out there to replace you. They do that. I think we've got hospitals and nukes, and we have things there that we want to keep protected, and they're really important for us, not really Germany. Same thing with Spain and other places. So I don't know that we won't have troops in Germany, but I think the larger message is
the 25th Amendment was written for the day when the Democratic leader of the United States Senate could credibly say, quote, "The president is ranting like an unhinged madman," as he said yesterday. It was impossible to imagine back when they wrote the 25th Amendment. It was impossible for them to imagine a day with the President of the United States ranting like an unhinged madman until Donald Trump took the oath of office.
Or war, as he likes to call it. I've listened to other members of the administration over the last several days, both in their public statements and in our private briefing. And what is clear to me is that they don't seem to know why they've dragged the United States into war. Furthermore, they have no plan how to get out. No clear rationale, no clear objectives.
The 25th Amendment was written for the day when a former Republican member of Congress who voted for that Republican president 3 times would declare to the world he has gone insane. A sitting Republican, someone who voted for this man 3 times, standing up and calling him insane. Not misguided, not off message. Insane. That word from his own side. And the Republican Party's response is just silence. Complete mute. Nothing.
No plan for the day after decapitating the brutal leadership of an awful regime. Make no mistake, we have the most powerful military force on the planet and in human history. There's no question that we could go all around the globe and take out leaders we don't like. The day after, that's the hard part. That's what we're facing right now. We have no idea who will step into this power vacuum created over the last few days. No plan for getting Americans who are in the region to safety right now.
And Lawrence O'Donnell wasn't wrong about a single thing he just said. The 25th Amendment was ratified in 1967. It exists for one specific purpose, for the moment when the person holding the most powerful office on earth is no longer able to actually do that job. The Senate's Democratic leader calling the President of the United States an unhinged madman on record in public. And not a single Republican has the spine to agree out loud. You know what gets me?
They're being told in so many ways you're on your own. No clear vision of what victory actually looks like, no exit plan. We pray for the families of the 6 brave Americans who have already paid the ultimate sacrifice. Our service members who are indeed the best among us, who go no matter who the president is, they follow orders. They are the embodiment of courage and patriotism, and that's why they deserve better than this. And so do the American people. After nearly 25 years of misadventures, Americans have grown weary of endless wars in the Middle East.
The people who screamed the loudest about Biden's age, who made an entire political identity out of cognitive decline, who ran ad after ad of Biden stumbling over a word, those same people are completely quiet right now, completely mute, because their guy is the one hiding behind closed doors for 3 days straight. And I want to talk about that hiding, because this isn't just a slow news weekend. This isn't Trump taking a personal day. The man does not take breaks. He is physically incapable of staying off camera.
We're not playing with Germany's rhetoric right now. We're not accepting that as status quo, and I think President Trump is making that clear.
Yeah. You know, CENTCOM had this big meeting at the White House this week where they presented all different options for the president if he were to decide to start military action against Iran again. I know we're still in this ceasefire, but you think he does that? I mean, it seems like that's the only glaring option we've got right now is using military force. You think he does that? And when do you think he starts?
He stops Marine One for reporters in the rain. He calls into cable news shows at midnight. He held a press conference in a McDonald's. This is a man who has spent his entire adult life chasing cameras. And suddenly, he vanished. 3 days. No public appearance. And what was he doing instead? Posting 50 times on Truth Social, going after Iran, going after Apple, going after NATO allies, going after Democrats, pushing election conspiracies.
We don't know the president's timeline. Yeah. I mean, every time he's given us a timeline, he usually does something before that timeline is over with. I think right now it feels like we're in a waiting game of can the American people accept high gas prices longer than the Iranian government can accept a bankruptcy. And I think that's the strategy. I think that's what President Trump wants to happen. I think he wants this somewhat diplomatic blockade to be the answer. It's quite true or quite possible that we haven't humbled the Iranian government or the Iranian regime enough militarily.
50 posts and 0 public appearances, because his own staff was apparently terrified of what the public would see if he walked out that door. And this is the article that broke it open. Read this verbatim because every single word matters here. Trump 79 hides out for 3 days amid fears of unraveling. President Donald Trump 79 is set to emerge in public for the first time in 3 days amid concerns that he's unraveling behind closed doors. The last time the president was seen in public was Saturday morning, April 18th at the White House, where he signed an executive order directing regulators to speed up the review of psychedelic treatments. Later that day, he visited his golf club in Virginia, but the typically camera-seeking president stayed entirely behind closed doors for the rest of the weekend and on Monday. Instead, he peppered reporters with phone calls and posted or reposted repeatedly more than 50 times since Saturday morning on his Truth Social platform. It comes as critics have raised the alarms about Trump's increasingly erratic behavior, from his threatening posts to apparent confusion over Iran talks. Since the president's last appearance on Saturday morning, he's fired off a series of angry social media posts, taking aim at Iran, Democrats, NATO allies, Apple, promoting election conspiracy theories, and more. The typically camera-seeking president. That's how they described him. Typically camera-seeking. And he vanished. That tells you everything you need to know about how bad it got behind those doors. His own people were scared to let him out. And then comes the Newsweek report. Read this, too, verbatim. Larry Johnson, a retired CIA analyst, claimed Trump tried to access nuclear codes but was stopped by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. That's it. That's the post. Short, devastating. A retired CIA analyst going on record saying the President of the United States tried to get to the nuclear codes and was physically stopped by his own general. His own general. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff looked at Donald Trump and made a judgment call. And that judgment call was, this man cannot be trusted with this. Now, I want to be fair here. This is one source, one claim from one analyst. It has not been independently confirmed by every outlet. So, I'm not going to sit here and present it as stone-cold fact. But here's the thing. It fits. It fits perfectly into everything else we are seeing. The hiding, the erratic posting, the confusion over where J.D. Vance even was. The phone calls to reporters where he couldn't keep his own story straight. The confusion over Iran talks. All of it points in the same direction. And the direction it points is terrifying because think about what it means if the generals are the ones drawing the line. Think about what it means that the safeguard isn't the cabinet. It isn't the vice president invoking the 25th Amendment. It isn't Congress doing its job. It's the military, informally, quietly, behind closed doors, just saying no and hoping he doesn't push back harder tomorrow. That is not a system. That is not governance. That is people desperately improvising around a man who should not be in that building. If you're still watching this, hit like and drop a blue heart in the comments right now. And the confusion isn't just about the nuclear codes. Trump was on the phone with reporters over the weekend. And he didn't know where J.D. Vance was, his own vice president. He said Vance was in the air, and then Vance showed up at the White House like he just materialized. And Carolyn Leavitt, his press secretary, had to keep correcting him on phone calls with reporters. The press secretary correcting the president in real time because he cannot keep his own facts together long enough to finish a sentence. This is a man who is supposed to be running foreign policy negotiations with Iran, who is supposed to be managing a trade war with China, who is supposed to be coordinating military operations across multiple theaters. And he doesn't know where his vice president is. There is a version of this story where you feel bad for him. A 79-year-old man who clearly should not be doing this job anymore, surrounded by people who are using him as a figurehead while they do whatever they want behind the curtain. There is a version of this that is almost sad. Almost. But then you remember that this man chose this. He ran for this office again. He pushed and clawed and lied and cheated his way back into the White House. And now the people around him are managing him like a liability, reading him his executive orders as he sits there nodding because he has no idea what's in them, keeping him away from cameras because they don't know what he'll say, and apparently telling his generals to make sure he doesn't start a nuclear war on a Tuesday afternoon because something on Truth Social made him angry. That's not a president. That's a prop. And the people who are most responsible for this are not Trump. Trump has always been Trump. He was always going to be this. The people most responsible are the ones in his own party who watched this happen, who saw the signs, who heard the reports, who knew what was going on behind closed doors, and said nothing, did nothing, voted for more tax cuts and smiled for the camera. The Republicans in Congress who had multiple opportunities to stop this man and chose power over country every single time. The cabinet members who could invoke the 25th Amendment right now and are choosing not to. The generals who are apparently saying no to nuclear codes privately but haven't gone on record publicly because they still want their careers intact. All of them are complicit. Every single one. Now play this next clip, because just when you think it cannot get more unhinged, Trump opened his mouth about Vietnam. When it's over, and it will end. When it's over, they wanted to be over immediately, and I just looked at a little chart. World War I, 4 years and 3 months. World War II, 6 years. Korean War, 3 years. Vietnam, 19 years. Iraq, 8 years. I'm 5 months, okay? 5 months. I would have won Vietnam very quickly. I would have, if I were president, I would have won Iraq in the same amount of time that we won, because essentially we've won here. Okay? I mean, people can play games. The Democrats can say, well, we should have done better, no matter what. If I did it in 1 week, they should have said they'd say, we should have done better. Look at Venezuela. I took it over in 45 minutes. It was basically a 45-minute, and by the way, a very strong military country. And we took it over in a day. But let's be nice. But we basically took it over in 45 minutes. We took it over during the attack in 45 minutes. But Mr. President, and they would say, I'm surprised they haven't said it that you should have done it in 30 minutes. It took too long. Are you serious? Are you serious right now? The Silver Spoon Draft Dodger just told us he would have won Vietnam in a week. Vietnam. The war that lasted 19 years. The war that killed over 58,000 American soldiers. The war that tore this country apart so badly, we are still having arguments about it 50 years later. That war, he would have won it in a week. He took it over in 45 minutes. Venezuela, a sovereign nation with its own military. He took it over in 45 minutes. And then he's like, Actually, it was a day. Let's be nice. No, wait, it was 45 minutes. He can't even keep his own fantasy straight. But here's what nobody is saying out loud, and I'm going to say it. When Donald Trump says he would have won Vietnam in a week, when he says he took Venezuela in 45 minutes, when he compares himself to World War II and Korean War timelines and says he would have done it faster, he is not talking about conventional military strategy. He is not talking about troop deployments and supply chains and diplomatic backchannels. There is only one way you end a 19-year war in a week. There is only one way you take over a country in 45 minutes. You already know what I'm saying. And this isn't me reading into things. This is a man who has already threatened to wipe out the entirety of Iranian civilization. Those were his words. The entirety of Iranian civilization. That is not a tariff threat. That is not a negotiating tactic. That is nuclear language. And he used it out loud on the record. And the people around him called it a negotiating tactic. And everyone nodded along like that was a normal thing a president says. It is not a negotiating tactic if it doesn't work. That's the part that keeps getting missed. A negotiating tactic is something that moves the other side. Iran is not shaking. Iran is not backing down. Iran is still doing whatever Iran was doing before Trump made his big civilizational threat. So it wasn't a tactic. It was a tantrum. A very dangerous nuclear-adjacent tantrum from a man who apparently tried to access nuclear codes and had to be physically stopped by a general. Connect those dots. I'll wait. And the draft dodger thing, I cannot let that go. Because this man had 5 deferments during Vietnam. 5. Bone spurs, they said. His feet hurt. He couldn't go. Meanwhile, 58,000 Americans who didn't have rich fathers to call in favors for them went over there and didn't come back. And now he's sitting in the Oval Office telling CNBC that he would have won that war quickly. He would have handled it. Him, the man with the bone spurs who spent the Vietnam era in Manhattan going to parties and playing golf and building his daddy's real estate empire. The audacity of that statement is genuinely hard to put into words. But you know what's even harder to process? Nobody in that interview pushed back. Nobody said, "Wait, Mr. President, you had 5 deferments. What exactly would you have done differently?" Nobody. Because that's the media environment we're operating in right now. Soft questions, nodding heads, and Trump just fills the silence with whatever delusion is currently running through his head. And this Vietnam comparison was not random. He wasn't just reminiscing. He pulled out a chart. He said, "I just looked at a little chart. World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, Iraq." And then himself. He literally put himself on a chart next to the largest military conflicts in modern history. He is measuring himself against World War II and saying, "I'm doing better. 5 months. I'm doing great." The tariff war, the Iran situation, whatever is happening in the Strait of Hormuz, 5 months and he's already comparing himself favorably to the Allied forces defeating Nazi Germany. That chart, that little chart he pulled out, that is not the behavior of a man who is mentally stable. That is not the behavior of someone who is cognitively intact. That is the behavior of someone who has completely lost the thread of reality and is now constructing an alternate version of history where he is the greatest military mind who ever lived, despite never serving a single day in uniform. And while he's playing with his little chart, what is actually happening in the world? The Strait of Hormuz situation is not resolved. 30% of the world's fertilizer moves through that region, 20% of its energy. If that strait closes, and we are closer to that possibility than most people want to admit, you are not looking at an inconvenience. You are not looking at higher gas prices for a few months. You are looking at a global depression. You are looking at famine in parts of the world that are already on the edge. You are looking at the kind of cascading economic collapse that takes decades to recover from. And the man who is supposed to be managing that situation just told a CNBC anchor he would have won Vietnam in a week. This is not a political disagreement. This is not left versus right. This is not even a question of policy preferences. This is a question of basic cognitive function, basic grip on reality, basic understanding of where he is, what year it is, what his job actually requires of him. And the 25th Amendment, I keep coming back to it because that's where this all leads. It was designed for this, not for a president who makes bad decisions, not for a president with low approval ratings, not for a president who loses a war or fumbles an economy. It was designed for the specific moment when a president is genuinely unable to discharge the duties of the office. Unable, not unwilling, unable. And we have a Senate Democratic leader saying it publicly. We have a former Republican congressman who voted for Trump 3 times saying it publicly. We have generals apparently acting on it privately. We have a staff that is hiding him from cameras because they are scared of what will happen if he speaks freely for 5 minutes. At what point does the cabinet look at each other across that table and say, we have to do something? At what point does J.D. Vance, and I am not a J.D. Vance fan, not on any level, not for any reason, but at what point does even J.D. Vance look at this situation and think, this is going to end badly for everyone, and I am the one constitutionally positioned to stop it? The answer to that question, unfortunately, is probably never. Because the people around Trump are not there to govern. They are there to benefit. They are there for access and power and proximity to money. And they are not going to pull that plug as long as they are still getting what they came for. The 25th Amendment requires the vice president and a majority of the cabinet. That is a coordinated act of political courage from a group of people who have demonstrated zero political courage at any point in this administration. So where does that leave us? It leaves us here, with generals quietly saying no, with staff hiding the president from cameras, with a retired CIA analyst going on record about nuclear codes, with a 79-year-old man posting 50 times on Truth Social while his team tries to figure out how to get through another week without a public meltdown. And it leaves us with 2 clips from one morning that tell you everything you need to know about the state of this presidency. A legal scholar explaining why the 25th Amendment was written, and the president himself casually telling America he would have nuked Vietnam into submission if he'd been around for it. This is where we are. This is the reality. And the people who have the power to change it are choosing every single day not to. Because their stock portfolios are up and their donors are happy. And as long as the machine keeps running, they don't care who's nominally at the wheel. But the generals apparently do. And that is the most terrifying and the most reassuring thing I have said in this entire video at the same time. Terrifying, because it means the formal system has failed so completely that we are relying on informal military resistance to prevent a nuclear incident. Reassuring, because at least someone is saying no. Someone has to. If you got something out of this, subscribe because it genuinely helps, and it takes about 2 seconds. Either way, glad you stayed to the end. Drop a blue heart in the comments if you're still with me, and I'll see you in the next one.